Medicom moves to Derry. This is your look at the Mafex It Pennywise action figure. Medicom continues their Mafex figures with the killer clown from the 2017 horror film It. This 6-inch Pennywise the Clown toy is fully posable for maximum action. Included with this Mafex Pennywise figure are several optional accessories, including heads, hands, and the iconic red balloon. Before we get a closer look at this killer clown, the first thing we're going to do is measure off to the very top of the Mafex Pennywise to see how tall the figure stands. Somewhat ironic, if you're looking at it, the figure stands 6.6. Only a shame there wasn't another space on the end of that. And translating that to centimeters, then you're looking at the Pennywise standing 16.9, almost 17 centimeters in height. Let's have a look at the figure's accessories. Why don't we start where the beginning of the film starts, and that's with the SS Georgie right there. While it's not made in folded paper and waxed over, it is certainly made of plastic, so it's probably going to be a little bit more durable than that. You can see scripted on the side of it is the SS Georgie. Generally, 9 times out of 10, when you do get a Pennywise figure, at least from the first chapter, they always seem to include an SS Georgie, so I'm glad that they at least included that. To go along with that, there are a couple of hands best suited for holding the Georgie. You just kind of wedge the boat in between the thumb and the fingers located on the side, and he does have the capabilities of holding the boat as well. And actually, technically, there are 2 hands, so depending on which side of Pennywise you want to display it with, he does have 2 different hands, one on, of course, either side. It comes included with the balloon. Not much gets changed, really, when it comes to the balloon. Generally, they're all the same sort of construction. You have like a hollow plastic balloon, and then you've got a wire that feeds behind it. Resist the urge to bend and warp this wire. You never get them back the way that they should be. They're never straight again. But it's basically just like a wire that just attaches to the bottom here. Now, interesting thing about this is normally you would just expect to pop those hands off and, of course, replace the proper hands. Sorry, I just dropped the balloon. Replace the proper hands to hold the balloon. But one thing that's interesting that Medicom did was they gave you swappable hands as actual parts of sleeves, as opposed to just the hands on their own. A neat thing also that they've done, and I'm sure you can probably see it as well, they've used frosted plastic right there to fill the interior of the hand between the thumb and the pointer. Now, of course, they could have just looped a little hole around. That's what we've done and seen with the NECA releases. But instead, they probably felt it was a little more safer and a little more secure to make the whole center area that clear plastic. All you have to do then is just take the balloon. You guys can probably already know where this is going, but we'll do it nonetheless. A nice little tutorial. Feed the balloon through the hole. And we'll just line it all up. And you just sort of twist it in place. Now, actually, I think at the beginning of this review, I had already pre-holed this extra hole here on the side. Basically, I'd already fed the balloon through, so I'll just go back to this hand because, well, I've already gone and done the job of making that go through, and you can do the exact same thing on this side as well. I just haven't done it on that side. You can see how the balloon gets fed through that hole, and that clear plastic, I mean, it's barely noticeable. You don't even see that it's actually there. And you can have them holding the balloon. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but I find the balloon sits a little more securely than the one that we had gotten from NECA. As you can see, it's not going anywhere. It still sort of looks like he's holding it. But again, like you don't have just a loop of white plastic. To change out the hands, actually, what you're going to do is reach to the side, find the hand, of course, the appropriate side, and pop the hand off. Don't pop it here. This is part of the rest of his sleeve. But instead, pop it from the interior. You can see there's a hole right there that's formed. Then go ahead and take the hand, pop this just back into the sleeve. Very smart the way that they've done that. I mean, I would love the fact that if they could have actually just done that with every single hand that comes included with Pennywise, so it just would have saved you having to pop it off the ball joint. And in this case, it doesn't look like the hand is sitting on a ball joint. Instead, it's been molded to that sleeve. Very smart on their part to have that as part of the mold. So again, like you don't even know it's there. When you just want to remove it again, you just pop that off like that and replace it back with the appropriate hand. And that's what he looks like when he's holding the balloon. It does look good. Now, if you are curious, though, the other hands, all of these other hands, the ones that I just pulled the sleeve from, actually do have their own ball joint. So then if you wanted to replace it hands with, say, the Georgie hand or a fist, for example, or a dynamic hand, which is the other hand option available, then again, you just pop this off the ball joint. Make sure you're using this sleeve, this one right here, not the one that holds the balloon, because this one, unlike the other, does have articulation in the wrists. Trying my best not to scare you by presenting you with a couple of scary-looking clown faces, but this is the other clown faces that come included with the Medicom release of Pennywise. You actually get 3 of them. I have to honestly say that I think the one that comes out of the packaging, the defaulted one, is the one that I like the most. But you do have the one with the stretched out jaw. You can see there with the teeth, very, very nicely painted and sculpted. Look at the fangs and get a good gander at those teeth. I'd have to be the dentist that would have to tackle those bad boys. But then there's also the smiling version of Pennywise. And to put that into perspective, I'll grab the one that was already on the neck. So you can see the difference between the two. This is just a more neutral expression on this side, right? Yeah, okay. And then this one, of course, is the smiling version. I don't know. I kind of like the regular neutral expression, to be honest, but the smiling one is good. The sculpt on all of them, actually, even the one I like the least, the elongated mouth, all the sculpts are good. I feel, if anything, the paint is probably the one thing that sort of lets these down. I mean, the sculpt, I could even say, is one of the better ones that we've seen for Pennywise, but I just feel like it's missing something, some little level of depth to it. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. I mean, like, the sculpting is top-notch. The shape of the face is the way it looks in the movie. But I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just the paint. Like, the eyes aren't dark enough, if that makes any sense. They're sort of treated to almost like you can see it right there. It's almost like that's speckled on there. The eyes, I don't feel, are dark enough. The peepers staring right now into your soul, I don't feel as nearly as dark as it probably could be. I mean, again, great-looking head sculpts, but I just feel like maybe the contrast, the darker colors need to be incorporated in there as well to just sort of jazz some of that up. If you want to replace the head, all you have to do is just pop that off the ball joint. You want to be careful as well because the collar pieces may go along for the ride. They're actually separate pieces. Surprised that they're not all, of the same. There's 3 layers to it, like a really disgusting layer cake. Anyways, we're just going to pop the new head onto it. And it can be a little difficult because I find like the post, while it is long enough, I find a lot of times when I'm trying to put the head in place, the neck of that ball joint seems to want to shift around a lot for me. Again, looking at the 2 head sculpts. Notably, the smiling head isn't that bad at all, but I think I still kind of like this one. The cracks on the top are very good on both of these. The smile is good on both of them as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm just picking too much fault with this. I mean, they're great looking head sculpts. I just feel like maybe they probably could just have been a little darker on the paint. Why don't we just leave this guy off for the time being, because I feel like he's spent a lot of time on camera. I don't feel like this guy's spent nearly enough time. We'll just put that one to the side. Show you guys quickly again the closer look at his face. Yeah, if only those eyes were maybe just a little more orange. The cracks were maybe just a little bit more stand out with a little bit of extra paint. I mean, the hair is really good. Let me just spin it around so I can show you the back of the hair. Tad on the shiny side, but I'm not going to find too much fault with that. The coloring is actually quite good on it. As for the rest of his costume, I'm going to be very careful to not disrupt and dislodge his arm. We'll talk a little bit about that in the articulation end of things. But the ruffled, sleeved clown costume, that's a lot of C's that he has in the movie, is very nicely recreated here by Medicom. They've gone the more darker gray, and I think it works well for it. I don't get a lot of extra gray incorporated. Like, normally here you'd get a lot more darker gray kind of airbrushed on top of it. And they've kept it generally light, knowing where to scale it back. It's not to the extreme where I feel like too much paint has been added. I probably maybe could have added just a little bit more on top of what they've done right now to the main base of it. But at least to their credit, they didn't dump it with a whole lot of unnecessary shadowing. I feel like too much of it would probably have ruined the figure. Of course, we've already looked at the sleeves. We'll have a look at those again. Really smart and clever on their part to have these as separate pieces instead of actually just having to pop the hand out and shimmy back on a new hand. Having that as part of the sleeve, that just removes out. Very smart on their part. This is all soft plastic. Underneath that is basically the workings of the figure. You can almost see what's happening underneath it. In fact, actually, you can move the skirting aside. And I'm guessing what you're seeing underneath here is, of course, Pennywise's nether regions. I'm sure he's not going to enjoy that. But you're probably also seeing like sort of the building base build, that's a lot of B's, of what the figures normally would look like underneath. He's probably going to have quite a small frame and literally just lots of layers over top of it. I thought this would have been more of the issue where this would have been shifting around a lot. I mean, it seems like they probably have split this, so it was probably a lot easier to put it on. It's interesting because it's actually 2 layers as opposed to one sort of cup over top. They've sandwiched it on as 2 separate pieces. I'm not really sure the reasoning for that, other than maybe if you want to just split the legs, that little cut on the side may come into handy. But, I mean, really it never comes into play at all, because a lot of times you're just hitting this interior piece before you're hitting the exterior piece. If that makes any sense. We can look at the cuffs on the bottoms of the legs. Those are done just as nice as the cuffs on the sleeves. And of course, you've got the Pennywise shoes as well. Classic now in design. He does have no peg holes on the undersides of his feet because he actually does come with a display stand, something I didn't mention at the beginning of this review. I felt the need to bring it in later. So often we just look at stands at the beginning of this review. I felt this stand deserved some extra necessary time. So we'll just put the figure right here. We'll get him to stand as best we can get him. There we go. Normally I didn't have any problems getting him to stand. Now, of course, the spotlights are shining down on him, and he's having stage fright. Anyways, looking at the display stand, I'm not sure if you guys have seen these stands before, but it basically has three holes, one at the back, 2 on the sides, and then you have the adjustable neck that adjusts in 3 places. 1 knuckle joint, knuckle joint, knuckle joint, allowing the neck to bend back and forth. One little thing I did do, though, old butterfingers of me, when you do put this onto the stand, let me just give you a little bit of friendly advice. With the holes, it's best to put your finger underneath it when you're feeding this through. I made the sad mistake on my part to have the stand sitting on the table, and then I pushed this down. Well, the problem is this doesn't sit leveled to the floor, or it does, but the plastic on the top isn't strong enough for you to be putting pressure on top. And what it ended up doing, so sad, it caused a little bit of crack. Not structurally where it will start affecting the stand from holding the neck, but it's just a shame that I had to put that crack there in the first place. Again, follow the advice of this guy. Don't do what I just did, and just hold the bottom. Don't put it on a flat surface and do it, and just sort of wiggle the adjustable neck in there. Now, it can go on either side. I mean, I would be more inclined to display it from the back, but you can do any side if you want. And it does give you some available options when it comes to displaying Pennywise, simply than just having him standing straight. Again, if you just put the neck post in, you can adjust and bring this far back. It doesn't have to be straight up unless you want to have Pennywise floating in the air like he was in Chapter 2. But it does give you, it gives you the option to do the dancing clown thing if you want to. If you want to have him like running, you could pull that off as well. And again, it's just a matter of attaching the waist clip here, just attaching around his waist. And it's actually quite secure. I did find like the neck to be a little on the loose side, but being that those are making use of screws, it means I can easily just go in there with a screwdriver and just not make the sound effect, of course, when you're doing that, but you can tighten those screws on those neck pieces so they're not going to sit as loose on the stand neck. So looking at the figure's articulation, this gets a little strange. Not so much on the head, more so on the shoulders. We'll talk about that in a second. But for the head articulation, his head does rotate back and forth. It goes up and down. I'm kind of now liking the fact that these are layered the way that they are, because they have a life of their own and they move independently from one another. It means that when you're also moving the head, you get varying degrees where these sometimes will look a little more closed, or they'll open up naturally the way that a ruffled collar should be. I like that. The head does move up, the head does move down, that head moves left and right, and you can somewhat rotate it all the way around. But again, because the way that curls, it's going to be a little more difficult. Okay, so one of the things about this particular figure, and I'm not collecting a lot of these Medicoms to know if this is across the board, I would imagine it probably would be, is that he does have shoulder articulation. And what they've done here is, of course, you had the arms that rotate all the way around. That's not an issue. The hands hinge out. The arms hinge out. That's not so much the issue. And they can also shift up and down. That's not so much the issue. Well, what is the issue? Well, the thing about the shoulders is that they also do crunch forward. And the problem with it is, let me just show you how the inside works. So what it is basically, you see this little hole on the bottom. Well, that hole plugs into, in theory, this ball joint that's right at the side of his body. It never seems to sit properly in place. I always feel like I'm snapping it in, and when I think I have it, when I go to move the arm again, now yes, it does give you a forward swing on the arm, but if you move it too far forward, yes, that's when it pops off that ball joint. It just barely holds in there. I mean, it's still structurally sound enough that I'm not going to always have the arms falling off on me. I mean, yeah, you could yank them and pop them off, and it still gives you a full stable hinge joint on these arms. But rotating it too much, especially when you hinge it forward, can cause abruptly these shoulder pieces here to pop right off their ball joints. It's clever on their part that they incorporated it, because yes, it does give you the option of bringing his arms forward to a much more unnatural state that most arms don't tend to go. I do like that, but yeah, the risk that comes with it, unfortunately, the trade-off, is that sometimes these do pop off their ball joints. They're easy to go back in. There doesn't mean that they're broken or anything like that, but it just means that they're more prone to that you're probably going to be popping those back in a little too frequently. For the arms have a swivel joint. They actually double hinge on the elbow, and you can rotate the hands. You can't really rotate it when it comes to the balloon hand, but you can certainly do it with the regular hands. The upper torso is on a ball joint, unfortunately, a lot of times. This is kind of where these figures come into problems. They do give you a lot of articulation, but again, when you are rotating things too much to the extreme, sometimes the torso will pop off its ball joint. It's happened repeatedly before the camera started rolling. And the shoulders, of course, yeah, we've already talked about those. As for the legs split out. They go forward, they go back, they swivel basically where they attach to the ball joints, and then you have a double hinge on the knee. Nice fluid motion also on that knee joint. Very, very happy the way that those turned out. Then when it comes to the feet rotate back and forth, attached to the underside of the cuff there. You can also hinge the foot back and forth. You can rock them back and forth this way. And he does also have toe articulation. Countless times I say, I always feel like I want to straighten out those toes, because I go back and look at it, and it's this weird shape, like it's got the toes bending down. I just always feel like I'm having to straighten those up. But a really good looking Pennywise. The construction is questionable. I mean, not questionable, but it's something that you have to get used to. I'm not used to the idea that if I swing the shoulders too far forward, they pop off a little microscopic sized ball joint. But if you overlook that, it's actually a really good looking Pennywise. Could probably use a little bit of depth in the way of its paintwork, especially on the face. But overall, a well executed, decently sculpted Pennywise that has a lot of available options for the way that you can display it. I do really like the Mafex Pennywise. Admittingly, though, I'm not so crazy about the price I had to pay for it. If you are in the States, living in the States, usually price of collectibles are a lot less, and you could probably pick and find yourself picking up the Mafex figures for about an $80 to $100 price point. Here in Canada, of course, they're tacking a lot more onto that because of the conversion. And of course, if you're picking that from a local comic book store, they want to be able to see a profit as well. I picked up Mafex Pennywise for an alarming $199. Ouchie wawa. Now, to be fair, again, I understand that comic book stores are picking this up in US dollars, and of course they have to be able to factor in some level of profit. But when you get a figure that's closer to a $200 price point and closer to the price range of what normally 6-scale figures go for, it is a tough sell. What you do get, though, for $100 and in this case $200 here in Canada, what you are getting a decent looking Pennywise, I will say that. It's constructed in such a way that, yes, when you are moving some things like his arms are prone to popping off. At least you can pop them back in. They're not broken or anything like that. And because of the stand, you can get them in pretty cool looking poses. Kind of like the pose that I've got here in Final Looks. But again, like $200, it's a bit steep. And one of the reasonings why a lot of times I just can't get into the market of reviewing more import toys. The Medicoms or the SH Figuarts, for example, are available in some stores in Canada, but very few and far between. And the ones that I do find are, again, closer to that $200 price point. If you have the available funds to get into a realm of collecting expensive imports like this, then yes, Pennywise is a great figure to add to your collection, but he is awfully steep, especially when you consider that NECA releases. I know people would debate NECA is more retail released, but when you get a NECA figure that's $30 and you get a Medicom figure that's $200, there's a bit of a jump from one to the other. Let me know down below in the comments section, though, what you guys think of the Medicom toy Mafex Pennywise. All in all, a good-looking figure. I just don't really like the price that went along with him. Ouch. Also, if you're new to the channel and liking the content you're seeing, consider the idea of hitting that subscribe button down below and turning on that bell notification and keeping, of course, those clownish peepers peeled. There's definitely going to be a lot of videos coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.